Yeah,
That's,
so she won't be here today.
okay, that is fine. I guess you guys aren't anxious to get your papers back, right? We just do that at the end? He says sarcastically. First order of business, papers returning. I mean, I don't have a lot to say, and that's a good thing. Normally you get the long spiel if there are kind of broad systemic problems. Obviously, some papers are stronger than others, some papers weaker than others. Some people went up, some people went down. But, you know, on the whole, they were what you would expect. They were a decent set of papers. And again, if you don't know what, even after reading my comments, if you can read my scroll, don't know why you got what you did, or just want to talk about the content of something, feel free to make an appointment and come to see me. Fair enough? We begin with Amanda.
I hate this so much. No, this thing, it literally, the abbreviation is basically Shackno, and it's like, obviously that means Shaquille O'Neal.
Try to do this side of the table first, so I'm not walking back.
It's not Shaquille O'Neal, it's Shackno,
Where are you?
which is a good thing.
I knew you were, I promise I graded one. Okay. Oh, no problem. Kennedy. And to that. Luke. Max is not here. All right, Sophia's not here. And then there are two. And Dylan. As usual, I'll give you guys a minute or two to take a quick look at what I said, try to decipher my handwriting. I see Kate does translation. Takes the scroll and makes it English. I apologize again for how long it took to get these back. I don't want to I hate doing that kind of thing, but there really wasn't any choice unless I was going to completely give up on sleep. Well, I try to ration it to minimal amounts. I do need some. In my younger days, I could do all-nighters. Once I did like 2 nights in a row. So for 48 hours, and I functioned pretty well right to the end. But that when I was young and energetic. Now I'm old, and tired. And I think a lot about my recliner and how happy it makes me. So it's a different world. Younger friends are always saying, want to go out after work? Is it? I don't know, 7 o'clock's awfully late. So, in any case, if there are no questions, you guys know that paper 3 is due a week from today, correct? Is it under control? Do we have questions you want to ask now?
Honestly, Dr. Grasso, I'm actually really behind on paper 3.
What?
Don't look
Yeah.
at her.
Okay. Well, if you do have any questions moving forward, obviously, I will read drafts and I will read outlines, et cetera, just with the caveat. You gotta give me a couple days, same day turnaround. You know, it's just not a realistic possibility. You should see what my inbox looks like. I have bad dreams about it. And as I was leaving the room, it was pinging and saying, you didn't sign this. We need to discuss that with you. No. Let me have my piece. Okay, if there are no questions on that, lest I forget, for next time around, the reading assignment is to read your final book, the Bullivant book. Fair enough, because that's what we'll be doing next class. I'm going to try to cover that in maybe my working plan without having sat down and opened the book and thought about it off the top of my head. Spent about 90 minutes on that and like an hour tying up some themes, piecing some things together, hopefully. Fair enough? And today's topic is the Do That book. Now let me begin with a series of, let me begin before I even launch into material. This lecture is going to be a little rough around the edges because I'm having to lecture under the duress of time. You kind of edit while I go. I can't kind of draw this out and discover at the end of class where I'm page 120 because it was really interesting material. I need to push through at least to just about the end of the book, if not to the end of the book. And that means I'm going to be editing my head or occasionally pausing to think, can I really do that? And before moving on. So in any case, as always, we will begin with a review. Okay, the review begins with the Canavan book. Canavan is exploring the privatization of religion. He doesn't give us a complete answer, in the sense you're not going to find an exhaustive answer of the privatization of religion. He misses, there are also things he doesn't discuss that he would readily admit are part of the scene, but he hits 3 of them, and for our limited purposes here, that's enough. First thing we ran into is the growing pluralism. It makes it hard to find religious expressions that everyone's comfortable with. Religious expressions that have the effect of uniting, the community rather than giving rise to conflict and dissension within it. So the second thing we remember what he talked about at the beginning. I love this, sentence that when we started, we worked from the beginning. We're going to create a common education for everyone. Didn't have to go that way. We created different education, but we chose a common education for good or ill. And when we set it up, we discovered the different Protestant groups vetoed religious content that they disagreed about, so that the schools could only communicate a lowest common denominator, Protestantism. Catholics came along and vetoed Protestantism. So the new lowest common denominator is Christianity. Jews came along and vetoed Christianity. Now we're dealing with biblical theism, or whatever you want to call it, and then finally you add large numbers of secularists to the list. And they don't want any religion at all, at least religion as it's traditionally been understood in the United States. Okay? Then we moved on from there to, what was it? The rise of the welfare state, incorporation, and strict separationism. We devised a welfare state. This welfare state was in tensions with the kind of robust religious presence that had existed in the past. Why? It implicitly taught the lesson, this is government's job, which disincentivized churches from doing anything. And even more importantly, disincentivized people for providing money for churches to do anything. Furthermore, it involved a massive increase in taxation over time, and what that meant, more money going to the government, meant people less money available to donate to the churches. So, and the lack of funds greatly impaired the ability of religious institutions to play a major role here. Okay? Theoretically, that could be worked around. You could devise a religion-friendly welfare state that, rather than replacing the churches, supplemented them, assisted them, played a subsidiary role vis-a-vis, subsidiary is the technical term, I guess, that would be used. Then you have incorporation. The religious provisions of the First Amendment, originally designed to apply only to Congress, are now held to be applicable to all levels of government. Again, even with this, you could still have a religious-friendly welfare state. But then you hit, so there has to be now one national standard. Then you hit what? Strict separationism. Okay, the older idea, non-preferentialism, was government can aid religion in general. It can't grab a couple religions or one religion and say, you guys get special favors because you're better than the others. It had to treat all the religions as equal in offering assistance. But the new idea that emerges in the 1940s, right when incorporation kicks in terms of the religious provision of the First Amendment, they were only incorporated in two decisions in the 1940s. One, I believe, in 40 itself, one in 47. I'm sure the 47 in Canada would have the other date for sure. Not that it matters that much. A strict separation is government cannot aid religion as against whatever the opposite of religion is, unbelief, non-religion, whatever you want to call it. So government cannot say, we think religion is good, so we're going to encourage it. Now it's not allowed to endorse, it's not allowed to fund, not allowed to encourage. Strict separationism is the final blow, the final nail in the coffin of the religious-friendly welfare state. Fair enough? And then finally, we had the idea of the neutral state, this theory of politics, the theory of politics of the neutral state. Okay, this theory starts off with the notion we each have a right to go to hell in our own way. We're free agents. I don't owe you anything. You have no claims on me. I have no responsibilities to you. I have the right to do with myself and my life whatever I want. After all, it's me. Okay? From this follows the idea of the moral equality of appetites, right? That's what we said. Where government can't encourage some ways of life rather than others. Some conceptions of the good life rather than others. Now let's bring this back to strict separationism for a minute. You can see the connection between this and strict separationism, right? Strict separationism says government can't encourage religion even if it's doing it in general. Neutral state says government has to be neutral about ways of life, which means it can't take sides between religious ways of life and non-religious ways of life. And in the world of the neutral state, government, the public square rather, has to be cordoned off from religion and religious influences. Government can't be neutral if I, as a member of Congress or the Texas legislature or the San Marcos City Council, am writing laws based on my particular view of the good, particular view of the right way to live. Likewise, voters can't be going in and saying, I'm going to vote for candidates who will promote my preferred way of life, my particular conception of the good. If I'm going too fast, slow me down. I'm trying to keep things moving today. At least I'll start getting tired, which I feel approaching. So there you have this notion of the neutral state. This means government, on one hand, morally neutral, right? And on the other hand, it has to be religiously neutral, as we just indicated, not only in the sense of pushing religion in general or pushing all religions together cumulatively, but in the sense that religious views and religious values can't be allowed to impact lawmaking and public policy. Fancy term for this, I don't know if I gave it to you last time, and it doesn't really matter for our purposes, but this is sometimes called the idea of a naked public square. All the religious influence is sort of vacuumed out. Okay? Canavan points out that the neutral state isn't really neutral because neutrality is not a possibility. Writing laws involves making moral judgments. That's just a fact of life, can't be avoided. Moral judgment, people's moral judgments are more often than not, but I would argue pretty much always, shaped by their religion. So as long as moral judgments are in play, religious beliefs and religious values are going to be operative in the public square. It's no longer going to be naked. There will be that indirect presence of religion that Tocqueville alluded to. There's also directly the issue that hits home most dramatically on the issue of education. Because, says Canavan, you can't devise a totally neutral education. You could devise an educational system that all Protestants might be able to accept. You can devise one that Protestants and Catholics can look and say, oh, I'm good with that. Yeah, that works for me. You can even probably divide one to include Protestants, Catholics, and Jews. But the more the diversity of views, the harder it is to find the common ground. There is the point where you're dealing with people who don't believe in any religion or don't see themselves as believing in a religion. People who may indeed be hostile to religion think it's a bunch of nonsense. You can't achieve neutrality. And the attempt to achieve neutrality ultimately, says Canavan, ends up imposing on everyone a model of education that reflects a particular point of view. And that particular point of view is the point of view of the seculars, of secularism. I'm trying to find a quote here that I had trouble finding last time, and I found it this time easily, yay. My memory isn't completely going, contrary to what my life claims. Okay, page 2 if you care. I read this last time, I'll just read it again. Middle of the second full paragraph, it begins public schools. Yet when the state teaches only secular subjects from a secular point of view in its schools, it willy-nilly favors those of its citizens who regard religion as irrelevant to life and believe that all human problems are purely human and secular answers. But there is nothing inherently secular about religion. There's nothing inherently secular about religion, and it takes this particular orientation and turns it into an established doctrine indirectly. So I think that is the overview of Canavan. Now we move to our friend Smith. You guys with me? You alert? You're more alert today than you were last time. And of course that's damning with faint praise. Last time you hardly had a pulse. But that's okay, I hardly did either. I've drank so much soda today, let me hope it gets me through my 3 hours of sleep. Okay? We looked at Smith. Okay, I gave you a little thing to read from Smith. I didn't even bother to mark it up and read you some quotes, because what I'm presenting is the argument of a book he wrote. Very good book that I would love to teach, but it would take 3 weeks and we don't have the time. And this paper I gave you doesn't cover all the book or even most of the book. but touches on at least a few of the themes to give you a flavor of Smith and a little bit of flavor of what he's saying. Smith distinguishes between two different types of religiosity: immanent religiosity and transcendent religiosity. As an example of immanent religion, he offers us the ancient world. Greece, Rome, but also those big things we tend to ancient Egypt, ancient Mesopotamia, but also ancient South America and North America and ancient China and ancient Southeast Asia. It was a pervasive phenomenon. And that type of religion is immanent in the sense it argues the cosmos is all that exists. All that exists is what we would call the universe. They would call the cosmos or something like that. There's nothing above it. There's nothing beyond it. There's no God up in heaven because there ain't any heaven. The cosmos is all that there is. In this world, there are generally, not always, a multiplicity of gods. But these gods are intracosmic in the sense they inhabit the world of space and time. They're not all-knowing. There are limits on their knowledge. They're not more powerful. They're not all-powerful. They are finite beings, simply beings far more powerful than you and I are. So they're sort of like superhero figures. These gods don't really give us a moral code. I mean, they may want worship and sacrifices and gifts, but they don't give us, as it were, a 10 Commandments or something like that, because look at how they behave. They're not exactly good role models. Okay? And again, you could easily spend days on that. What's the book? I want to give the kingship, but if you look in the Oakley reading, I won't try to give this from memory because I'm going to gobble it. He cites 2 books by a team headed by a guy named Frankfurt that explores this in a lot of depth, hundreds of pages in depth exploration. The other kind of religion is transcendent religion. That is represented by Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and also to some extent by things like Buddhism and Confucianism, Hinduism, although less completely there. And in this transcendent religion, in sort of its pure form, argues that God is outside of the world. God stands outside the world. He's not an object or subject within it. He made the world. He sustains the world in existence. He is all-knowing. He is all-powerful. And he is demanding in the sense that he has rules of conduct over and above just simple acts of worship that he commands. Okay? So we have these 2 different religiosities. In the Roman Empire, says Smith, there is a conflict between these 2 different religiosities. And the winner turns out to be transcendent religion in the form of Christianity. The reason there's a conflict, why there can't be kind of articles of peace or an agreement to disagree, is these religions embody, reflect, mandate a certain way of life. They demand that you live in certain ways, that you do certain things, and not do other things. And since their commands are contradictory, and since they have a pervasive influence, when I say they have commands about how you live, I don't mean that you go somewhere on Sunday for a few minutes and worship. I mean they control everyday life. They have a framework for thinking about politics, for thinking about sexuality, for thinking about family, for thinking about morality. They have implications for every area of life, and their implications are radically different and in contradiction with one another. So you can't have a society based on both. That is not possible. Ultimately, a choice has to be made, logically. Now, politics doesn't have to be logical, so maybe they can coexist for a time together. But in the long run, this is a battle to the death. There can be only one. What's a movie that can be only one? The Highlander. They're making a new one, I'm told. I haven't liked any of the movies, but I've seen all their TV series. I mean, it's not, how can I say, it's not Shakespeare. But it's, for what it is, it's well done. I recommend the old TV series. Little plug there. I don't get paid for that, by the way. So in Rome, you had this conflict. Transcendent religion wins. Immanent religion, doesn't totally disappear, but it's very, very dramatically marginalized, pushed underground, pushed really to the periphery of social existence, and generally viewed with hostility and contempt by the society at large. Fair enough? Smith's argument, he's not simply writing history here. What is his subtitle? What's his book? Pagans and Christians in the City, Culture Wars from the Tiber to the Potomac. His argument is that we have seen a revival of immanent religiosity in America. It's been going on for a while, but by the second half of the 20th century, it reaches critical mass, so it becomes an important presence in the culture. Now, this immanent religion is very different from the immanent religion of antiquity. This immanent religion has nothing to do with Zeus or Mount Olympus or anything like that. But nonetheless, it is an immanent religion. And he offers us, as an example of this, our friend Ronald Dworkin, who Kahneman already quoted, who was for a couple decades an important player in debates in legal theory and philosophy. Only died maybe around 2010 or something like that, maybe 2015. Anyway, Dworkin identified himself religiously. I am an atheist. But he adds to that a caveat. I am a religious atheist. But it's not entirely clear what that means. He's an atheist, so there's no God, but there's apparently something that kind of gets put in the place of God. There are certain core principles that he thinks exist on the structure of the universe. Sound familiar? That we can discern and order our lives by. There is, in other words, a sacred. Not a sacred in the same sense as a Christian sacred or Jewish sacred or Islamic sacred. But there is a sacred nonetheless. Now, he posits this he writes a whole book defending this view. But it emerges out of his problem, kind of the intellectual problem he runs into and wrestles with. He makes his reputation as a defender of human rights. We need, most famous, taking rights seriously. We need more rights. We need to safeguard them better. We need to build in more guaranteed rights to the end all and be all of politics. The problem is when critics come along and say, okay, we'll take that for granted. Where do these rights come from? he doesn't really have a good answer. And he works his way through several different answers. One of them is, we have them. Well, why? Because we believe in them. If you think about that, that doesn't work at all. If I believe in unicorns, that doesn't mean unicorns really exist. Okay? That doesn't mean there are unicorns in reality. People believe lots of things that aren't true. There are some people who don't believe this is a great course, I bet. Okay? Obviously crazy. But then, another kind of modified version of this, Jeff turned around and he says, why don't you prove to me that I don't have rights? And I'm trying to see if I remember this exactly, there was a very famous retort to this that was just devastating from Alistair McIntyre, who's another writer on this subject. And let's see if I can get this exactly right. Not exactly right, it doesn't work. Oh, it's just cause I can't prove that there are no unicorns doesn't mean I have to take unicorns seriously. The burden of proof is on those who suggest this is something real. Dworkin's put the burden of proof in the wrong place. I didn't do justice to his quip. It's really devastating. So in his fire, he plays around with different things, but finally comes around to this view he calls religious atheism. And there is a sacred. The sacred is immanent. It's in the world of space and time. The sacred is, on the one hand, human beings. Human beings have meaning. They have value. They're to be treated with the greatest of deference and the greatest of respect. They're not something you mistreat, like they were just a piece of garbage or something. Like a piece of old carpeting that you throw out when you're done with it. It rained last night when my dogs took out carpeting. My wife's not going to be happy. She already isn't. And the other thing that's sacred is the universe. And look at the universe. How marvelous and majestic it is. Look at pictures of the Earth from space. Look at pictures of the distant constellations with all the stars and all the colors and stuff. We're dealing with something sacred there. And those things provide us a grounding for human rights. We don't need to address the question whether he's right. They provide a grounding. But what he's doing is he's designing a religion. It is a godless religion, but it is a religion nonetheless. It is an ultimate concern, an account of what's highest, what's most important, what we need to orient our lives by. It's not just a godless religion, it's also an immanentist religion. There's nothing beyond the world of space and time. So that is our friend Dworkin there. Smith pulls us together and he says, look, a lot of times we lay out the culture war. The most common way to lay it out. It's a struggle between religious believers and non-believers, between secularists and religious believers. Smith says, no, you're wrong. It actually is a fight between the proponents of transcendental religiosity, primarily in American context Christians, and the proponents of an immanent religiosity. So, the culture war, Smith said the culture war consisted of conflicting notions of moral. Not Smith. Hunter said culture war consists of conflicting conceptions of moral authority. But he also says, by the way, it's ultimately a religious thing. That is the part of it that Smith sort of steps into and addresses. Smith overtly says this is a religious conflict.
between two different types of religiosity that find themselves in the same country, in the same culture, both being influential forces, and which can't seem to coexist with one another for the good reason that they're simply contradictory. It's an either-or choice. So that is Smith. We good? I love the Smith book. I wish we could have time to spend a whole class on it. But unless there are questions, I must now turn my attention to our friend Duthow. Now, to begin with, the Duthow book is a little dated because the discussion of the American religious scene, it appeared in 2012, means it's probably written in 2010, maybe early 2011. And there's been a lot of, despite you think, 15 years, that isn't that long. There's been a lot of water under the bridge. You see him near the end of the book. The phenomenon of the nuns come up. By nuns is again N-O-N-E-S. Someone on their paper wrote N-U-N-S, the nuns. I assume they were fooling with me and wanted to get me to chuckle. Because if I don't assume that, I got to go off by myself and have a good cry and ask myself why I went into this line of work. Was it really worth choosing to be poor for less? Am I doing anything other than dropping pebbles in a bottomless well? But anywho, he at the end of the book he starts talking about the nuns. That's how it's coming out. I say, wow, there seems to be this weird trend going on that these numbers of people are multiplying. He says a little bit about it, but the full magnitude of what was going on was not apparent in 2010. There were intimations something is happening here, but we don't know exactly what. Fair enough? He begins talking briefly about the centrality of religion to human culture, but if you guys read the book, you saw frequent mentions of Tocqueville. And he then moves to a debate in America circa 2010. A big argument about how America is doing that ties in with religion. And he says there are two opposing stories that are told. I'm over on page 2 again. One story is this, and I'm on the second full paragraph on page 2, third line. The first story, he says, holds that Americans have lost their way because they've fallen away from the faith of their fathers, or else have been bullied into apostasy by secular beliefs. Continuing down in the next paragraph, this story says that America is a nation in which religious faith has been steadily marginalized with increasingly disastrous results. The scapegoats include progressive educators, activist judges, Hollywood elites, and the deophobic, I missed that word, deophobic media. That means kind of allergic to God. Totally missed that. That's a good word. That could be usable. So that's one view. We have too little religion. That's what's right. This country is going to hell in a handbasket. But there's a second point of view, a second story that's told about why we are where we are. And the second story says the problem isn't too little religion. The problem is, guess what? Too much religion. So over on page 3, a growing chorus has begun at the bottom of the first paragraph on page 3. A growing chorus has begun insisting that the United States is in decline because it's excessively religious. On issue after issue, these critics make Christian belief the problem in and of itself, casting the political controversies of the 2000s as an apocalyptic struggle between science and ignorance, reason and superstition, the light of progress, and the medieval dawn. But if you're curious, they're the ones on the side of science, reason, and light. Okay? That was intended as a joke, so I set up that binary. Okay? It didn't work. He looks at these two stories, and he says, a plague on both your houses. I think you both got it wrong. He says, what he says is, our problem doesn't consist of too much religion or too little. It consists of the wrong type of religion. It consists of, hence the title of the book, Bad Religion. So I'm trying to find this. Okay, last paragraph on that page. America's problem isn't too much religion or too little. It's bad religion, the slow motion collapse of traditional Christianity, the rise of a variety of destructive pseudo-Christianities. Note that's key, pseudo-Christianities. Since the 1960s, the institutions that sustained Orthodox Christian belief, Catholic and Protestant alike, have entered a state of near terminal decline. The churches with the strongest connections to the Christian past have lost members, money, and authority. The elite that was once at least sympathetic to Christian ideas has become hostile or indifferent. And the culture as a whole has turned its back on many of the faith's precepts and demands. The United States remains a deeply religious country. That's on 4. And most Americans are still drawing some water from the Christian well. But a growing number are inventing their own version of what Christianity means, abandoning the nuances of traditional theology in favor of religions that stoke their ego, that stoke their ego and indulge or even celebrate their worst impulses. These faiths speak from many pulpits. Conservative and liberal, political and pop cultural, traditionally religious and fashionably spiritual. And many of their preachers call themselves Christians. But they are increasingly offering distortions of traditional Christianity. Okay? Fair enough? Now let's catch our breath for a moment and you'll work out some of the details here. First thing I want to call your attention to is again, this notion of bad religion, a type of religion we don't need. Tocqueville argued that a big reason America, quote unquote, worked was the role religion played in it, correct? But by religion, although he used the term religion over and over again, although sometimes he speaks of Christianity, by religion, he doesn't just mean any old set of beliefs that might be described as religious, Duthat says. What he's talking about is historic Christianity. Okay? Not a particular form. And his argument, I'll read you some quotes in a minute. Is there, 18 flavors of Protestantism, and then you throw in Catholicism, then you throw in, if you want, Eastern Orthodoxy, though it's only ever been the most minor of players in America. And by looking at them, you can see they all share something in common. There is, if you will, what I would call a lowest common denominator there. The name he gives for that lowest common denominator, stealing it from another author, as most of his stuff is. This is popularization, not original scholarship. His name he gives it is mere Christianity. Mere Christianity. I'm looking for a passage. Over on page 6. that big, the last full paragraph on the page towards the bottom. A chart of the American religious past would look like a vast delta with tributary streams and channels winding in and out, diverging and reconverging, but all of them fed ultimately by a central stream, an original current, a place where all the waters start. This river is Christian orthodoxy, not the orthodoxy of any specific church, whether Lutheran, a Presbyterian, or Roman Catholic, but the shared theological commitments that have defined the parameters of Christianity since the early church. These religions, this mere Christianity, or what do we call it, singular or plural, has dominated until fairly recently the American cultural landscape. It's changed and evolved over time. You include more kinds of Protestants and to roll in Catholics eventually. But it played a critical role in making American democracy work. It has done a lot of different things in that regard. I'll just mention a couple here. See if this sounds familiar. It's brought in America with a strong moral consensus. We're agreed on certain fundamental moral principles. So there are things not up for debate, but they're taken as premises. That's where we start. And with that, connect with that an internalized moral compass. Most of all, one more point, and I'll get to let you. One more point. And this Christianity act to check the destructive impulses of a democratic society. Democracy produces individualism. It's reminded us we have duties to others. Democracy produces consumerism. Okay? An obsession with creature comforts. It reminds us there's a lot more to life than creature comforts, than material goods. It acts as a check on the strongest impulses. Let's just say the worst impulses of a democratic society. Even in a democracy where the majority has immense, not only legal power, but kind of moral authority, it reminds both individuals and groups, including the majority, that they ain't God, and they have to answer to a higher power. And the reason I stress this is a religion that encouraged individualism, I haven't forgotten, wouldn't have done the trick. A religion that promoted consumerism wouldn't have done the trick, and we could expand that and go on for quite a while. It was the specific religion that did this. That doesn't mean it's the only religion that might have been able to do it. Maybe other religions could have done this job. But his point is not all religions. There are religions that would be profoundly destructive because they encourage kind of the worst impulses of democratic man. They encourage, they license, they promote the kind of bad behaviors democracies are going to be tempted to. Ella Jane.
Initially, I had a question on what you meant by Eastern religion, but now I have a completely different question because you got me thinking.
Well, let me challenge the equal. Let me do Eastern religion first. I'll give you tip. What we tend to forget, we tend to think of the Christian world. Protestants here, Catholics there. That's the map. There's a whole third wing of the Christian tradition that has several 100 million adherents in the world. We're kind of oblivious to them because very few of those adherents happen to inhabit the United States. But they're found in places like Russia, all over that sort of area, Greece, okay, all over that area of the world. And they're very ancient Christian churches that go back. They're among kind of, I mean, literally where those Eastern Orthodox churches are today. I mean, they were literally one of the first places where Christianity emerged. Okay, they're part of the oldest sort of Christian presence. Ella Jane, does that answer it?
Yeah.
Question number 2.
This question might be kind of crazy, but I know because we're talking about like how religion gives us those values, blah blah blah. Very short summary, but like, and we might have talked about this in Stone of Hope, and I might have just missed it because I didn't read a whole lot of the book, sadly. But
Remember, she's not enrolled in the class, so just for the record. Go ahead.
But like, is the type of Christianity used by like African Americans and like former slaves, does that start like deviating? Because I know there are issues race-wise about a moral consensus, and there were movements to push people like back to Africa or create their own communities. But I was just wondering, like, in religious circles, because I know some of those religions kind of combined Christianity with stuff from like their homes, right? Or am I crazy? You might not know.
Look like what? I missed the whole...
They combined like, because they had like religion from wherever they came from, and that came here, but like, so some of those traditions got combined with Christianity, which would like skew the moral consensus.
There are some currents within black religion, right, that
Yeah.
are syncretic, they draw on it, but by and large, the overwhelming majority of African Americans are Protestant. They're also Catholics, but like 5 or 10% of them are Catholic. And they're actually one of the more vibrant centers of American religion that still hold on. I mean, just go back for a minute to the discussion of the Chappelle Post. What drove the civil rights movement? Well, prophetic Christianity, that's what he's talking about. That's the tradition, one of the traditional versions of Christianity here. So no, they're very traditional in their doctrine. Okay. We good? Okay. Next order of business is and we'll start moving quickly in a minute because we don't have a choice. One more thing on the front of Christianity. Something to keep in mind is Christianity is a very complicated, multifaceted religion. It is full of paradoxes. It is in giving that you receive. As an example, probably most of you heard that famous prayer that gets attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, but actually was invented sometime around 1900 by someone looking to sell holy gods. And they had his picture on it, so he gets attributed to people who quoted in books. He actually never said it, but I'm saying it is in giving that we receive. It is in forgiving that we are forgiven. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. And I quote those lines and get kind of a paradox. If you think about that, hold on. It makes sense. When I give, I actually receive. Well, if I'm given, how can I be receiving? And Christianity is permeated with those kinds of things. I come to give you life and life more abundantly. Pick up your cross and follow me. Try to reckon that doesn't sound like a lot of fun there. And it's just full of that. The basic doctrines. Christ is true God and true man. We hear that so many times. You don't realize how radical that is, and frankly mind-blowing and arguably incomprehensible. That's why St. Paul calls it, what does he call it? A blasphemy to the Jews. I'm distorting it. And a scandal to the Greeks. Because it doesn't, One kind of being. You're a human being, I'm a human being. My dog, Shadow, is a dog. My son's old hedgehog, who late and lamented, Hedgie, is a hedgehog. But we're told that Jesus is two types of being. And but that's like, oh, what you're saying is right. In some respects he's human, in some respects, no. 100% and 100%. It's not the left side is divine and the right side is human. It's not 12 hours a day human, 12 hours divine. He's 100% both. Well, you have to be with 200%. That doesn't make sense. But and that's been wrestled with. There are vast numbers of books written about that. Like there's a whole notion of a Trinity. God is one. There's only one God. God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Well, have three persons. Well, how can it be one God if he's three persons? Okay, Amanda is a person. Kate's a person. Isabella's a person. Okay, that's easy. But you're saying he's three persons, but he's one.
But isn't it like not three persons, but like three entities? Like,
No, that's the point. It's not three entities. It's not like it's a machine and has different parts and stuff. And it is hard to understand. Did I tell you the story about the ocean and stuff? St. Augustine, one of the great writers in the theologians' Christian tradition, who wrote a 500-page book on the Trinity. I gave up at around page 150 when I was younger. I'll reread that in retirement. He tells a story that he was walking down a beach thinking about this book and how he didn't seem to be able to write it. Just, he needs to explain this, he can't figure it out. And he sees a little kid, and the kid is running, has a teaspoon. The kid's running to the water, getting a teaspoon and pouring the teaspoon into a hole. When he gets to the kid, he says, little boy, what are you doing? He says, oh, it's easy. I'm moving the ocean into my hole. St. Augustine says, you can't do that. That's crazy. That's not possible. The little boy's response is, you take the story as apocryphal or not, the little boy's response is, that's no crazier than you thinking you can understand the Holy Trinity. And then the boy disappears. And he's on the beach by himself. It's full of these kind of things. And it's really hard to hold them together. There's so many different, like a structure with all supports on the side. You pull out one thing, boom. You have to keep all these things in balance. There's tremendous tensions, okay, between the different beliefs. And the temptation becomes, let's simplify. Okay, he's only a man, but he worked for God. That was his job. Things like that. Simplify, simplify, simplify. But that is what historic Christianity refuses to do. That's the hallmark of the thing. It has debate. It had debates for 1,000 years about how you reconcile these things, and it almost always took a posture of both ends: true God and true man. God is one. God is three. On and on and on permeates the whole thing. And he discusses this, by the way, in the first point. I'm not going to read to you page 10, but after he pauses several times to discuss the paradoxical and mysterious character of Christianity. Mystery here doesn't mean a problem to solve. It means something that the human mind intrinsically can't understand. It lies beyond human understanding. But nonetheless, it's true. You can't assume everything that exists, human beings can understand it. If you ever try to look at quantum physics and stuff they're doing in science, it boggles one's mind. Okay, so it picks up there. The temptation is, again, to simplify it. Get rid of the tensions. He goes, what today is the traditional Christianity is fading in America. And it's being replaced by kind of vulgarized versions of Christianity that one way or another eliminate a tension or group of tensions to make everything sort of simpler and easy. He takes us back to a series of chapters on historical context here. Takes us back to the post-World War II era. What happens in the world of religion during the post-World War II era? You've read books, you know this. I hate when you all shout out at once, and I can't hear anyone.
People.
What? I didn't hear you. Popular. There's this huge religious revival. Prior to World War II, it looked like religion was losing its place in American culture. I mean, it's still very present, but its place seemed to be getting weaker and weaker. After World War II, there's an upsurge in religiosity. There is this huge revival. It occurred at the kind of level of the pews, the average guy level. Where is, if I can find the passage, it was a cool passage. Here we go, 22. In 1930, this is like second line on the page. In 1930, 47% of Americans were formally affiliated with a church. The number had risen to 69 by 1960. The prestige of religious leaders rose. A poll from 1957 found that 46% of Americans described the clergy as a group doing the most good in the nation's common life. Enrollments in seminaries and Sunday schools increased steadily. There was a huge surge in church construction. Americans spent $26 million on sacred architecture in 1945, $409 million in 1950, $1 billion in 1960. These numbers are adjusted for inflation. Okay? Not since the Middle Ages enthused one of the many books on this subject has there been promise of being able to advance in the building arts of the church. And the theme, and it goes back, the book narrative popular culture partook of the same revivalist spirit. The theme of religion dominates the nonfiction bestsellers of Publishers Weekly analysis. Shares of Bible, Bible purchases exploded, go through a lot of movies and things like that. There's this huge upsurge of religiosity at the mass level, but it's also, and he thinks this is more significant, at the intellectual level. There are intellectuals who move towards Christianity. Walk through a bunch of names of writers who are non-Christian or just not interested in it, particularly who after World War II suddenly acquire new orientation, poets and whatnot. And he argues that it's the philosophers and things like that. There are a lot of articles about intellectuals returning to faith, and makes the cover of magazines and stuff like that. He then and why did this happen? The answer is quickly. First of all, you don't really know, but his theory is: number one, you had World War II, the absolute horror, 70 million dead, the concentration camps. Then you had overlap with World War II, but go beyond it, the experience of totalitarianism. Both the Nazi version and surviving the war strengthened the Soviet version. So the Soviet version. And stuff. So those are things that influence this. Then he goes on to identify 4 prominent Americans, all are kind of theologians and not stuff, who play a big role in popular culture and have influential voices. the first, and we don't have much time to spend on them. First one is Reinhold Niebuhr. Reinhold Niebuhr is his representative, sort of mainline Protestantism. As you can see, these guys play themselves out in different traditions. And he was tremendously intellectual. He was featured on multiple occasions on the cover of Time magazine. His books were bestsellers. He was very widely admired. There's even an informal group set up called Atheists for Niebuhr. They didn't believe in God, but they loved what Niebuhr had to say about the world and how human beings should live together. President Obama said that Reinhold Niebuhr was his favorite philosopher. So you have the presence of Niebuhr, and again, Niebuhr wants to push kind of, again, this mere Christianity, I'm going to call it that, Orthodox Christianity. Whether Christianity, he's an opponent of those. Remember, we talked about the liberal Protestants and want to water it all down and things like that. At least on the surface, because you can argue that. But they quote his brother Richard, who was almost as prominent as him. He had a brother who taught religion at Yale, saying of liberal Protestants, a classic quote here I can't resist. What they gave us is a God without wrath, who brought men without sin into a kingdom without judgments, through the administrations of Christ without a cross. Again, page 29. Marsden also quotes that. Back in the Marsden book. Remember, Niebuhr featured in several parts of the Marsden book. Next guy along this line, again, someone we've heard of. I'm not, so I don't want to spend time on it. Billy Graham. Billy Graham wasn't necessarily a figure with Niebuhr's intellectual stature. He was not by trade a theologian. He was an evangelist. But he had a huge cultural impact, as we talked about. Events with hundreds of thousands of people traveling city to city, drawing vast crowds. I remember as a kid, they would always Broadway, at least when he was in New York, all these local TV channels, that's all you could get. There goes my Yankee game. Okay, old Channel 11. Instead we got this guy, and people singing hymns. Then you move from him, we need a Catholic, Niebuhr, mainline Protestantism. Graham, Billy Graham, evangelical Protestantism. We need a Catholic here. What about Fulton Sheen? Again, we talked about him. He was a bishop. He wrote many books, some of which were bestsellers. Very prolific writer. So the guys cranked out like 2 books a year. And I've read most of them, even a lot of them. The ones I've read are pretty good. Because he was a serious theologian. He chose to write popular works. But because he wanted to evangelize, but he was a serious thinker. I mean, he won an Emmy for his performance on TV, and he was the most watched American TV show for several years. Now, could you imagine that today? I couldn't even imagine that when I was, say, 12 years old. It's unthinkable. Final person he mentions is Martin Luther King. As a representative, she stepped down to the game, as a representative of the black churches. And he talks about the Protestantism of black Christianity there, and how it was what fueled the civil rights movement. Okay? How it was what drove it. It was the worldview. It's what gave it its energy. In the course of his discussion of King, he spends a lot of time talking about somebody else. Who else? Somebody you know, somebody you've read this semester. Right. Much of the discussion of King is straight out of Stone, I hope with appropriate footnote and stuff.
Wait, which guy won a performance?
Fulton Sheen. Hard to believe, it's hard for me to believe when I first heard that. I knew he was big and highly visible and on TV. He won out. Very, very different world. And these guys were all prominent figures in American culture. And they were all very ecumenical in their orientation. Okay? They reached out to people in other faith traditions. They partnered with people in other faith traditions. Because they were advocating, if you would, translate to our lingo, a lowest common denominator of Christianity as what America needed. But in the mid-1960s, it begins falling apart. And it falls apart. This collapse was not predicted. At least it was not widely anticipated. I'm sure there were one or two people. There are always a couple people saying collapse is imminent. The end is nigh. But it falls apart very quickly. The first place it hits, and then when it hits the worst, is the world of mainline Protestantism. Niebuhr is our stalking horse for that. He was both a member of it and a critic of it, who wanted to reassert its Christian identity. And that is one of the most astonishing and stunning developments in American history. The so-called mainline Protestant churches were growing and vigorous. They had millions and millions of members. They had an unbelievable amount of money at their disposal. Because those mainline Protestant churches, their congregants were more often than not wealthy people. They had tons of money, they had seminaries, they ran schools, they did newspapers. They were like a huge presence. Yes?
How much because you said they weren't wealthy.
No, I said they were.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Yes, they were wealthy. That's why it's shocking they fell so quickly and so hard, because they had all the resources. I'll put it in baseball terms. If the Rangers have a bad season, awful year, you say, oh, well, they're the Rangers. Because, they have limited resources. They're a relatively small market team. They can't handle the kind of payroll, say, the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Mets have. But if the Yankees or the Dodgers or the Mets just totally fall apart, that is stunning, because they're supposed to be the safest ones. They're the ones with the money and the resources to make this work. They're not scrambling. And that's the case of this. Just like the bottom, like somebody pulled the plug and the lights went on. All of a sudden, the seminaries emptied, the schools collapsed. And in a period of 10 years, these institutions shrunk dramatically. In every sense. Membership collapsed, institutions collapsed. It was down, down, down. Bottom, I'll give you just a quick sense. Bottom of page 58. The Protestant mainline's membership stopped growing abruptly in the mid-60s, then just as quickly plunged. Of the 11 Protestant churches that gained more than 1 million members in the early 1970s, 8 had fewer members in 1973 than in 1965. There were 10.6 million United Methodists in 1960, more than 11 million in 1965, 10.6 million in as late as 1970, then down. The Lutherans peaked in 68, the Episcopalians in 66, the United Church of Christ by the middle of this decade were all in steep decline. The Presbyterian Church USA lost about 1.5 million members between the 1960s and the 1980s. By the early 1990s, 60% of Methodist parishioners were over 50, and there were more Muslims in America than Episcopalians. there were more Muslims in America than Episcopalians. This is a dramatic, stunning collapse. Okay? A version of the same thing happens on the Catholic side. It maybe happens a little later, a few years behind the Protestant curve. But the Catholics undergo the same process. They don't collapse as completely as the main line does, but they become, I'm looking for the phrase in drawing blank, a shadow, that's what I was looking for. A shadow of their old selves. And America talks about in a 10-year period, you went from 70% of Catholics going to Mass on a Sunday to 40% in 10 years. Today they debate whether that number is 10, 15, or 20, depending on which social scientist you want to believe. So the same thing happens there. But the only church that, the area of churches that don't collapse are the evangelicals. They manage to, for the most part, weather the storm. But of course, they were way poorer than the Protestants or even the Catholics, and less influential. So they don't fall, but they were never at the height the other guys were. The black church, by the way, remains more or less intact as well. More or less. And why does this happen, you say? Again, he offers all sorts of reasons. You could go on endlessly. Let me see if I can read my handwriting. Here's some of the reasons he gives. What is that word? I can't read what I'm reading. One thing he mentions is wealth. Okay. In the period after World War II, the United States economy exploded, and we became far and away the wealthiest society, not only in the world, but in the entire history of the world. I mean, America in 1900 was a pretty wealthy place. You remember those of you who were with me, we did the crossbow. But America in 1960 is a much wealthier place. The economy is growing in leaps and bounds. Everyone's moving out of these ethnic neighborhoods and small apartments in the city out to big suburban houses. Every family now, it's not just they own a car, they own 3 or 4 cars, right? Everyone has to have their own car. It is an explosion of wealth. And Tufat points out, the Bible says that affluence negatively impacts religious belief. That's something about wealth and the sense of power and self-sufficiency. It gives you, acts as an impediment to religious belief. Next factor along the line is, let's see, which one do I want to get? Wish I could figure out what the one is I can't find, because that's really annoying. Okay, I'm coming up on this. I went past it, okay. Well, I'll give you now, I'll go out of my order here. Next thing that affected things is the sexual revolution. Americans' attitude towards human sexuality changes. You can argue this is part of consequence of declining religiosity and in part a cause of it. But the churches that hold on to traditional belief find themselves holding very unpopular positions on questions concerning human sexuality. Another thing in play is politics. The thing in play is in politics. Yeah, well, there are political divisions among the American churches during this time of religion? There were to some extent, but only kind of a broadly limited consent. The political divisions weren't that deep. There was a tremendous unity on moral issues, like, say, the civil rights movement, in which Catholic priests and bishops marched along with black Protestant ministers and with mainline Protestant ministers and things like that. We'll discuss the career of one of those ministers in a few, a little bit down the road. And again, the book contains much more detail. I'm going to have to, I'm rushing through it. Another factor he maintains is globalization. Oh, I was on politicization again. I'm trying to move it there. Now, deeper political conflicts begin ensuing. Okay? For example, you get the struggle over the Vietnam War. And then in its aftermath, you get something we've been talking about a great deal. You get the blank war. What war is that? Culture war. And all of a sudden, churches, some of them are on the political right, some of them are on the political left, are engaging these issues, and hence alienating those that don't share their view. You go to a church, circa 1970, that is, you're very pro-war, the minister's constantly denouncing it from the pulpit, you become alienated and say, I don't need this, and walk away. Fill in other issues like abortion and whatnot. And you get the gist of this. And then the final point, I know what it is, says globe. That's short for globalization. And that's his term for the changing American religious scene. The movement of all these new religions into America. All of a sudden, it's not just Protestants, Catholics, and Jews. There are people representing all other different religious traditions. And suddenly, this world with sort of limited options becomes a world with a crazy number of options, crazy number of choices. I've always assumed X is the only game in town. Now there is one. So in any case, things begin to fall apart. There are two responses to this. He gives each one a chapter. I will do each one in like 2 minutes. Accommodation and resistance. Hopefully, by the way, if you've read the book, this stuff is echoing. Accommodation means you try to kind of latch yourself aboard the culture. The culture is moving in a certain direction. You try to accommodate it. You try to update your church. For example, it's teaching on human sexuality as a means of gaining more popularity. You're losing members, you're losing traction. Let's teach a different message. Problem is, that's the initial response, and that's the most widespread response. Problem is, with the benefit of 2020 hindsight, we discover it failed, and it failed utterly and abysmally. The churches that pursued accommodation were the ones where the decline was the sharpest. It sort of became what was going on already. The accommodation turned into a steroid shot. The other option was resistance. This is, we stand up and we assert our traditional beliefs. We don't apologize, and we defend them vigorously as true. And it's something that people need to embrace. You remember Hunter's discussion of the culture war when he talks about new divisions and stuff? Something again remarkable that nobody 10 years before would have predicted is historically evangelicals and Catholics did not get along. Many evangelicals thought the Pope was the Antichrist. Okay? Now you suddenly have an alliance of evangelicals where they literally set up organizations, one of which is evangelicals and Catholics together to evangelize together, to champion mere Christianity and to bring Christianity to bear on American life. An interesting figure here looms prominently in the chapter, but I will only mention, I just want to mention because he looms so large. And unlike someone like Martin Luther King, he's someone you haven't heard of, is Richard John Newhouse. Story is this: Newhouse is a Protestant minister. He ends up pastoring a church in Brooklyn in a very impoverished area. Interestingly, two of my cousins worked for him at that church. Anyway, he goes on to link up with Martin Luther King and become a prominent figure in the civil rights movement. Goes on to become a leader in the anti-war movement. He's very vocal about his political and social beliefs, but there's also he also spends even more time championing the cause of Christianity. He's primarily an evangelist and a pastor who runs a church. He preaches sermons on Sunday. When we slide into the early 1970s, Newhouse begins to rethink certain things. He notices that when he speaks, as he frequently does at anti-war rallies in Washington on campuses, people are raising the Viet Cong flag. And that really bothers him because, yes, he wants the war to end, but he doesn't want the other guys to win. We maybe shouldn't be fighting there, but the people we're fighting are evil. Okay, and that really bothered him. The other thing was when Roe v. Wade came down, abortion laws had already changed in New York and California somewhat. When Roe v. Wade came down, he said, "Okay, team, we got our new cause." Looked around, and most of his old buddies didn't follow him. They weren't interested in fighting against legalized abortion. Of course, there was serious thought begin to evolve, as they say politically, eventually moving from a figure on the left fringes of American politics to, you might say, a little bit right in the political center. He's not like hardcore right, but a little bit right. More importantly, he leaves Lutheranism and becomes a Catholic priest, and then becomes an advisor to Pope John Paul II. And he's the guy who puts together all these joint evangelical and Catholic, organizations and whatnot. And there's a lot more that could be said. It's interesting about some of the permutations there, but I don't have time. But the bottom line is the Newhouse Project and all forms of resistance, they fail. They fail. They maybe help the churches that are involved not to lose any more market share to hold their ground. But they make no progress at all in winning the culture and changing the culture, in bringing about millions of converts. And that, he says, is kind of where we stand. And that leaves us with a vacuum. And after a break, which we're ended a quarter after, I will tell you what leaps in to the vacuum.
It's just a question, but and I don't know if it was, again, man, I should probably just read stuff, I hope, guys.
I didn't understand most of what you just said.
But, because I know we talk about the importance of Dr. King and how he really influenced civil rights, and I think, at least in a religious aspect, and I know there was a lot of controversy on it, but Ira Rustin, who was his right-hand man and helped organize a lot of the marches for gay and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I know that was probably downplayed.
Chappelle dealt with that.
He did? Okay.
Yeah, that's in the Chappelle book.
So I should
Because
just
in particular, some of the people who worked with him were atheists and whatnot. They were not Christians and whatnot. But the bulk of the
Muslims too.
Muslim church. But the bulk of the group was like King, a Protestant minister, and that was what kind of gave the movement its flavor and its temper. That was the heart of the movement. We're on a break. Come back here a
Were they
quarter
just
after.
Muslims, or is it Nation of Islam?
What's the difference?
Nation of Islam is more like, I think, Black Power type of.
What are you drinking there? Let's see. I had one earlier. Before I came to class.
So SZA and RZA and Jizza,
Those are people.
yes, two, Jizza and
Finish everything for the next
Jizza
class?
and RZA
What was
are both
everything?
part of Wu-Tang Clan.
The memo?
Or like the stuff, like the notes and all that kind of stuff.
What
But they
notes?
joined the Nation of Islam.
You
Notes?
don't have to have notes, but like,
The Black National.
I don't have any notes at all.
Oh, just off the
But I
notes.
need to go print my memo. Because I haven't done that yet.
yeah, I have like notes and stuff. Do you feel prepared?
Yeah, I have a memo, and I'm just supposed to argue my memo, right? That's all we're doing?
Well, no, you do a 2-3 minute, like 2-3 minute thing or whatever, and then we like debate or something.
Yeah, we were
Sometimes
discussing like your options and stuff.
See, right there wasn't one.
I mean, that's what I think's going on. I'm not really 100%.
So what's your stance?
Invade. Yeah.
No.
I thought it'd be kind of funny.
His stance is what?
He wants to invade North Korea.
Invade North Korea?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
In this hypothetical situation.
Well, the hypothetical is that we found debris that suggests that they can get a nuclear.
Is that your lemonade, or are you just taking it?
It's ours. It was
But
from
I
our
said-
Chick-fil-A lunch.
Not to use any military intervention.
Let's go.
Even if they had nuclear weapons, why does that mean we can invade them?
Oh.
How come we can get nuclear weapons, but North
They
Korea
haven't
can't?
signed the contract, therefore they might use them.
I just want to let you know I'm missing a big
What?
word in hockey.
The contract, isn't there a contract
A
saying that we
non-proliferation
won't?
treaty?
Yeah.
It's gonna be such a good game.
Yeah, so what does that have to do with it?
Actually, so sad. But I'll live.
You know what, maybe I'm
Because
the
I
wrong
don't have
person to have this
electronic
conversation.
So I can't like focus.
I'm not gonna pretend like I know a lot about nuclear or anything,
How come only certain countries can have nukes and others can't?
because we decide who can and can't.
We're the only ones that use them. We should not have them.
That we know of.
On people, yeah.
That we know of.
It has been a minute. Since
What if someone would just nuke me?
Well, technically Friday morning. Friday in the middle of the night.
We need to go out and actually stay out until 2 a.m.
I wanna be killed.
So I don't really fuck with that.
What
I
do you
sent
have to
like
do
5
with the
different
black?
suicidal comments today.
No.
What?
It's gonna get worse, by the way.
No, I'm done going out for like a hot minute.
Am I not allowed to suicidally ideate? That's like my thing.
It's gonna probably
You just wanna be edgy.
I wanna be edgy. I wanna be dead.
Because we usually do life dances until like 1.
I know, but the problem is at that point, I'm tired, I wanna drink, and I don't, like, you know, like, it's just not, like, I feel like I just keep pushing my limits and really, like, I feel like it, like, going out has just become me pressing on the wound.
You didn't
And it's
know.
not so bad. Well, Helix is different because I'm a chain smoker, and also no one's trying to, like, you know what I mean? Like, drinking is secondary, talking is primary.
ChatGPT just makes up stuff sometimes.
Is there another printer in this building?
Just gives you straight up stuff that's wrong. We have to refuse.
Where at?
It's in our office,
Where's your office?
329.
Down that way?
You know
Does
what?
it have the
That's
same system where I
probably
can
a lot
like just
better
fucking
than
email it off the
Well, I
cloud
thought I
or
was
whatever?
gonna get an 80 flat.
No, I
You can't email it, you'll just sign it to a computer, I can show you.
Yeah.
When is it due? Next Monday? Next Friday?
I had something that I.
Yeah.
Wait. Guess what Grasser just told me?
Not predicted.
In the spring or in the fall?
You're gonna teach. Oh, that's exciting. Did you do the class already?
She's gonna do that with us. If you need slides or anything, I can send you my slides. and you can
What I
send me
need is
pictures.
someone to go and make my slides look pretty, because I quite frankly, A, don't know how to do that, B, don't know how to do that, 3, I don't have the,
That means you're working with us somewhere. You're working here with us somewhere.
am I?
Yeah, because he's gonna, that's why the IA job is taking classes. That's what he had me and Dylan do last semester, so.
Okay, well,
Well, you can make your
Assuming there's funding for it.
Your slide's pretty.
Can you make my slides pretty? Why? Just put them on your computer. Who cares about? I'm not gonna finish that
No,
sentence.
because we can't use our computer for the little simulation we're doing, so I'll be cut off.
Okay, that's good.
Nah, bro. No, I can't work.
Round 2 is like debate or
Yeah, like we do our 2 to 3 minute oral argument or whatever, and then after that we debate to kind of come up with a final, I guess basically a final memo.
and third round is the conclusion.
Huh?
And the third round. The third round.
The round's tomorrow, maybe next week. But I don't know, I think it's like a debrief or something like that. No, that's when we bring our argument to
Hey, how did you?
Oh, okay.
How
Damn.
did you do on the video?
Oh,
Or Dr.
yep, just
P.
got the email.
So it's like 3 hours? No, right?
I hope not. If we could get up.
It says
early,
like
that
30
would
to
make my
60
day.
minutes.
That means Bagnolo gets to be your bestie.
Damn.
When's the next one?
Did you have to take this on course? And if you didn't,
I did, but I took out a loan, and I took another class, so I didn't have to do all. Would be, because if you, one class isn't considered full-time, 2 classes is over the summer. So you can get loans if you need them. But.
well, I might already have money, that's what I'm asking.
I mean, it's, however it is, I don't remember the specific price, you have to pay for it. You don't have to pay for any of the materials because you have to have access to the books. You already have access to the books. Because you're an IA.
Dude, I mean, you gotta read that bitch.
Oh, yeah, no,
To
he,
be fair, I already read it as an undergrad. Like, as an undergrad, I actually did the reading and took notes. Well, yeah, but I just gotta go find that.
he's gonna assign you to read the things and then send him a summary of X amount. And then create a PowerPoint throughout the weeks, and it's not a hard class, it's
Yeah.
just,
Also, do you know how
That's just
those
tedious.
books are?
they're so boring.
but they're boring as hell.
It's about,
I said that I used to. Oh.
I unironically went up to Moira and was like, you have a page that's formatted terribly because it's like way too long and it could easily be broken up into subsections and it just isn't.
The only problem is that it's like an online book.
Yeah, there's no physical copies.
Yeah.
I'm sure there is, but they're probably like certified.
And as much as I have an affinity for physical books, I'm not gonna do that.
Or you use like a hard thing and just print out the chapters when you're going over them.
I don't know about that.
Leave them in your desk. So you don't have to take them home or anything.
I will shoot myself if I spend my summer in that windowless room.
Yeah, that's so fair.
I will be doing my work literally anywhere else.
And depending on how many other IAs are going to be here this summer. We gave ourselves stuff to do last year. We moved all the boxes. There were a lot of test boxes. So Josh sits full of test boxes and we just moved them all downstairs.
Well, I can't carry a single one, so.
We also just kind of hung out.
I'm trying to get hired this summer in the history department. See.
It's gonna happen.
I heard I'm trying to get high this summer. Well, that's easy.
What's the difference? Hired, high,
Who knows? Who knows?
How do you decide what my vibe for the summer? You know what I mean?
I know what my vibe is.
What is your vibe?
Can't say that.
Yes, you can.
Can you write it down?
Whisper.
I can.
say that out loud. Why is that inappropriate? But what? Of the male?
It's a joke, but it's also like the reality.
Yeah, bad news. By definition. I know it's not the same, but
But yeah, that's my plan. I'll be there. I'll be like 6. I'll be.
by the way, I asked that question.
No, I'm sorry.
I felt so bad.
No, because I felt like I was in high school again, low key. Like,
Wait, when?
when we mentioned black religion, everybody started looking at me.
I didn't look at you.
It confuses me. Why I
He
I
said-
love well no I love Grasso, but why is he? Oh, he's only standing over there now. Like
Always.
he's only talking to you specifically. About
I know. I just look at him and I'm like, yeah.
you learn so much because he's only talking to you.
That's all what I went and got on Sunday.
More?
What is that?
These are the best things. They're crepes from Trader Joe's.
Oh, I took her to Trader Joe's for
Can you
Christmas.
believe?
How do you
So
not like it?
Kennedy, if you had friends and like these people are like you're really good buddies and they're in your town doing stuff and then they don't even tell you.
Oh,
Can you believe that?
See, and I want to purchase something, but there was.
They have the book people without me.
The vibe was
What
yeah,
people?
as soon as possible.
Book people.
what is that?
It's a bookstore in Austin. Can't believe you went to book people without me.
What did y'all like though?
We didn't buy anything, that was the point.
You didn't buy anything?
You just
Listen,
went
there was
to
too
the
many people
vibe.
in there and we
Oh
both had our
my
backpacks
gosh.
and we were both very tired and I just wanted to go home.
I go
And
like
there was fuck ass traffic.
Y'all should have
6 times a
gone.
month.
It's because you were in Austin. Coming
Yeah,
back
I
here.
know. And then, dude, no. We were at a freaking intersection trying to turn left for, I shit you not, like 20 minutes.
That's facts.
The thing changed 8 fucking times before we moved.
That's facts.
I was reading. I didn't know.
I was getting my patience.
Y'all should go
tested.
to Book Learning. It's like for people, but it's smaller and a cute little feminist store. You have to wear masks in there because like behind the counter is like this really big dike. Like it's such a
Well, I
vibe.
don't think you went to where you guys.
Oh, yeah,
Which one you choose? The Bee Cave?
They require masks
The one in downtown?
because they have the this is their
That one's
policy.
nice.
Because they're like, COVID's not done, like people can still get it and be kind of courteous to like others.
Who is this?
Book Learning in Austin.
Okay.
It's a cute little feminist bookstore.
I was there once, like 20 years ago. They didn't require masks in those days.
Yeah, it's a thing after COVID.
Hey, no problem. You're not late. Well, actually, technically you are late, but I'm going to sit here for a minute and try to
I don't remember how long the
see
break
what I
was.
can do.
I'm not gonna lie. Maybe one day I'll finish the novel. Whoever had my book beforehand highlighted it in like this yellow and I just can't.
No clue.
Pre-highlighted book?
Yeah, well I bought it used, but like it's
No, but that's great.
I don't like the color that they used,
Oh.
so I don't like yellow. That's why I use pink.
Okay.
So
You don't like yellow?
I don't like yellow.
I don't like yellow for myself.
Well, it's essential.
I used to wear yellow shirts sometimes, but my wife said no when I got married. It wasn't a good color for
Don't
me.
you have cowboy boots that you're also not allowed to wear?
No, they won't let me buy them. So they won't let me buy them. Believe it or not, they don't. They just say I can't pull off the Texan thing. Hard to believe.
You should just lean more into New York, you know? Just be a Yankee.
Yeah. So, yeah. Wait. Yeah, sometimes when I'm back east, I'm going to do it. Does everyone in Texas have guns? And I said, no, not everyone, just most people and stuff. And, you know, I mean, we probably have about 20, if you count all my kids who are adults living on their own. We had an uncle who died, my wife left us a veritable armory. So we used to have like
2 guns in the family. Now we got 20 plus. So
My stepdad has somewhat of an armory.
it's funny. My older daughter, who's very kind of quiet and sort of timid, and we tried to take her shooting once, and she really didn't like it, and didn't enjoy it. It was so loud and so scary, and she was this rifle with a big kick and stuff. Not that I'm any expert. I barely do any of this stuff. It's my sons who are into it, but they talked her into going in, and now she likes it. She wants her own gun.
Dr. Grasso, not to very abruptly change the conversation, but my mother showed me the Message version of the Lord's Prayer, and I think my brain hopped out of my head. It is so, because I know, last semester, and I know Paul
What's the
about
Message
it.
version? I don't know.
It's like, instead of give us our daily bread, it's like 3 square meals, and it explicitly says save us from the devil instead of trespasses or sins and stuff like that. It's gross. I'm not a fan.
I wonder if that's accurate, because I've read a different translation once. I'm going to have to look into that and get back to you on that. In any case, back to the book. We're not making good progress, despite rushing. Page 145. So, resistance and accommodation have failed. Next to the last paragraph on the page. Culture abhors a metaphysical vacuum, and there was no materialist ideology capable of supplying the kind of holistic account of human life that the great isms of the 19th and 20th century had attempted to provide. Marxism and fascism had been ground into fertilizer by the wheels of history, and Freudianism was increasingly regarded as a superstition rather than a science. Darwinism supplied explanations but not meanings. The attempts of evolutionists to answer the ultimate questions were either thin and unpersuasive, or else led quickly into the Nietzschean abyss that only a few safely tenured academics still felt comfortable plumbing. So the waning of Christian orthodoxy led to the spread of Christian heresy, rather than the disappearance of religion altogether. And he takes us through 4 broad different versions. There's some overlap between them, and they're all completely distinct. The first chapter, and again, I'm going to have to go through this really quickly. The first chapter is called Lost in the Gospels, okay? And it deals with how can I put this? Purported discoveries that give us a radically different understanding of Christianity. Or, we together? You with me, Jay?
Yeah.
You with me, Kennedy? Okay. Or new versions of Christianity. And he starts with a newspaper with an incident. I'm trying to see what we're here. One year there was this big story in 2006, just before Palm Sunday. The National Geographic Society held a press conference to announce the publication of an ancient document that promised to turn the Easter story on its head. Styled the Lost Gospel of Judas in the Society's publicity materials, the text in question had been encouraged in a Middle Eastern burial cave in 1978. And blah, 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 go through the history of the document moving from hand to hand.
Was that from the Nag Hammadi?
I don't believe it was, because it says, given the date, that would be well after that. He does discuss what you're talking about later in the chapters. And there's this radically different picture of Jesus in the Gospels and what really happened. And it made a big splash and spurred a story of articles saying, wow, we've totally misunderstood Christianity and stuff. So for a week it was famous and got a lot of attention. But then some stuff happened. A scholar looked at the original document and the translation that they were using and said it's a mistranslation. Your translation isn't what the document actually says. And secondly, there it's determined by references to events and stuff in there that the document dated from several hundred years after Christ walked the earth. So this was not some sort of contemporary document written by his contemporaries. It was not written by the Apostle Judas or anything like that. And he says there are these constant efforts to, every few years you get something like, we've discovered a new ancient document. And this has become quite a trend over the past few decades. It's come down to pop up, there's a big fuss, then we get looked at more closely. No, about historical accuracies, the Gospels, and especially the Pauline epistles, are very close to the real events. These things were 200 AD, 300 AD, something like that. They're not really credible alternatives. Or in some cases, the documents were a little earlier that were known and rejected by the contemporaries who were part of the whole story, who were present in many of the biblical events and whatnot. Related to this, there's another trend that keeps happening. People keep saying, I've read the Bible, and I think I've figured out what's really true in there. Because a lot of stuff in the Bible, they conclude, is not accurate, it's just made up. But I've distilled for you the kernel of the gospel, the core of the New Testament, the things we can trust and count on and are reliable. And he discusses all sorts of different people who undertook this. Some of them prominent people, some of them not so prominent people. One of the people he mentions is one of America's own founding fathers. Who is that person?
Probably not Thomas Jefferson.
I must be going deaf. I'm not hearing anything.
Not Thomas Jefferson.
Yes, Thomas Jefferson.
Oh, okay.
There you go. So I thought at first you said Thomas Jefferson. I didn't hear the nod. But I knew there was something going on there. Yeah, it turns out Jefferson later in life took a copy of the New Testament and got a razor and cut out from it things he thought didn't belong there. No, Jesus wouldn't have said this. No, the apostles wouldn't have done that. No, Lazarus couldn't have risen from the dead. Went through, removed the parts that he thought were fabrications and were false and were myths, that were superstitions. And now we have a shorter version of the gospel, but much more accurate. Remember, I think if I remember my Jefferson right, he doesn't discuss this. He did that several times. As life went on, several different versions. So I think I read one of the final version at one point, but it's 25 years ago, and I remember barely anything of it. But now the bigger point, and just lots of other people who do this. And the point he made, the point he wants to make, well, I'm going to make a couple. First, it's interesting, the people who do this. Because when they kind of rewrite the Gospels, edit them, get out the stuff they don't think is credible, what you get is something that closely resembles them. Or somebody said, these are examples of autobiography. I think Albert Schweitzer said that. They said, why take this out as opposed to take that out? How are you in a position to sit there and say, well, this is incredible, that is incredible? A lot of the documents are what we have, for good or ill, as frustrating as they can be at times, as fragmentary as they are. But a lot of these attempts to edit end up making a Jesus who thinks exactly like the person who did the editing thought. Turns out at the Jefferson vote, Jesus is just like Thomas Jefferson. Remember, you throw Thomas Jefferson in some clothes from around 33 AD, yeah, he could be Jesus. And he looks through this, and he says, when you look at the old documents that get recovered and get some publicity, or you look at these efforts, what you find is a common thread. And the common thread consists of simplification. Going back in time, Christianity is very complicated. It's full of paradoxes that are hard to understand, hard to make sense of. How can you receive by giving? How can there be one God but three persons? It's full of these things from beginning to end, and it sort of is a both-and kind of thing. Because we weren't the first people to see these tensions. That they were wrestling with them in apostolic times. There were debates about how we reconcile this stuff. The first 500-600 years of the Catholic theology, or Christian theology, is nothing but efforts to figure out. Okay, make sense of this. How can this be? Jesus says the Father and I are one. Jesus said the Father is greater than I. What do I do with that? What do I do with that? At the trial, I guess it's in Matthew's Gospel, he embraces the name of God that was given Moses at the burning bush. I am. But in other parts, he talks about I'm a servant of God. And, they've been wrestling this with forever, and what historic Christianity did was hold on to both sides. So we got these things that are in tension with one another, but we think, that's simply the truth, that it's full of these tensions and stuff, and it has to be accepted. In all these cases, what you have is simplification. Drop parts of it. Make it a simpler doctrine. And it turns out, in terms of the people who write the Gospels from their personal version of the Gospels, it inevitably sounds just like them. What they did was make a Christianity that they could be comfortable with, that worked well with themselves and their personal beliefs. I'm looking for a passage here. On the wrong page? Yeah, it ends on page 169. And then there's a section there, I'll just briefly summarize. I don't want to read you a long quote for the time, but briefly it talks about, you ask yourself the question, how did the Bible come to be? It's not like it dropped out of the sky one day and hit somebody on the head and, thank you for the message. The Bible, what we call the Bible, which means literally what? Books. It's books. What was put together approximately 300 AD. There are lots of writings out there about Jesus, about all the Old Testament stuff. Don't forget about that. And Jewish leaders had been wrestling for centuries with which of this is authentic. Which is truly inspired by God, or weird or mysterious, it might seem, and which is just human fabrication. The Christian leaders had to do the same thing. So they had access to some of these, kind of new gospels that have just turned up. They also had action to quote to these old gospels that they rejected. The term would be uncanonical, not to be included in the canon. And what you get, they sifted through, and this is what they, who are nearer than we are in time to the events, came up with. We don't really have a you can reject that, and that's fine. But we don't really have a basis for improving on it because, you should have included this, you should have included that. That those attempts simply, they haven't worked. They were things rejected by them for reasons they gave. There are things that we know historically are erroneous, date from 400, things of that nature. So you're dealing with this reality, and they choose to accept all the apparent contradictions. It's a both-end approach. And that's where we stand. In the oldest documents we have, contemporary, very close to contemporanean, are the Pauline epistles. The Gospels came later, but there's a general agreement among scholars. I can't argue with them because I'm not a scholar in that area. They date 50 or 55 AD, which is very close to the actual events. And then he ends the chapter with a tour of the Da Vinci Code. Does that ring about book that got made a movie that was a bestseller for a while? That purports to be a reconstruction of all these things and stuff. And that he points out is just total fabrication. Express fear. People think some of this might be true. This is simply a guy sitting at his computer making up stories. The next chapter is Pray and Grow Rich. This is everyone's favorite when I talk about this. He focuses this chapter on the main focus, the inclusive focus, because a minister currently in Houston, he has the big ministry there, he has TV shows and stuff. Anyone know his name? Because this guy's president knows, I thought somebody would recognize it. Joel Osteen. Okay. You knew? Why didn't you say something then?
He doesn't deserve his name to be uttered in this.
I am uttering it, so all names are welcome here, even if we're going to say some critical things about them. So Osteen is an influential pastor, and he starts off by looking at the gospel message. And he begins with Billy Graham. And he says, quotes Billy Graham here, says, you want to know what the gospel message is? We're all on death row now. The only way out of death row is Jesus. Okay? He says Billy Graham said, that's what we learn from Scripture. We're in a bad way. The world's wrecked. We're wrecked. We're all going to die, and someday this world is going to cease to exist. The only path is Jesus. Now listen to Osteen. God wants us, Osteen says on 183 in the big middle paragraph, too many times we get stuck in a rut, thinking we've reached our limits. God wants us to be constantly increasing, to be rising to new heights. He wants to increase you in His wisdom and help you make better decisions. God wants to increase you financially by giving you promotions, fresh ideas, and creativity. And in the last paragraph on the page, he refers to this as the baptizing the pursuit of worldly gain. You with me? Now let's pause here for a moment. Knowing what you know about American culture and stuff, right? Having read and been a student of your Tocqueville, does Joel Osteen surprise you? Right, I don't think he should, because Osteen says, not Osteen, Tocqueville says, the better source. Tocqueville says that American culture, and democratic culture in particular, pervaded by consumerism, by material concerns. He talks about how American Christianity has had to tread delicately there. Okay? It has not attacked, said consumerism bad. It has not said sell your belongings, give them to the poor, and come follow me. Advice that Jesus was prone to giving, which wasn't always well received. American Christianity had to say, well, it said the pursuit of wealth is fine under certain conditions. You're generous with the poor. You earn your wealth honestly. You don't make it your entire life. You leave room for higher pursuits. And Tocqueville also said in this context that American preachers spend a tremendous amount of time talking about this worldly benefits of Christianity. A lot of times saying, here's how Christianity will help you in the here and now. They talk about how Christianity in the context of eternity, eternal salvation, death, judgment, heaven, and hell. But whereas in the old days that was all preachers spoke about, now in America they have a new tack where they also give equal emphasis to the worldly benefits of Christianity. So Christianity said was walking this tightrope, right? I think was the phrase they used. Had to bend but not break. It wouldn't be surprising, given the situation, that would sometimes break. And when it breaks, you end up with this. And he walks you through a whole history of this in the chapter. Its intellectual origins, taking us back into the early 1800s and whatnot. So he walks you through all these things, and then he makes another point. Let's see if I can find the page. Trying to read my handwriting. I don't think I have the right page here. But anyway, a lot of quotes from ministers promising material success. And stuff, and making that very central to their ministry. And then again, he suggests this is a heretical version of Christianity. It leaves a lot out. For example, it does it to whereas the gospel is full of admonitions about the danger, and constantly admonishing people about the dangers of wealth, of acquisitiveness, of that as an actual threat. Right? It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to inherit the kingdom of heaven. I mean, that's pretty dramatic, right? Now let me contextualize that, because it's not quite what it seems. The eye of a needle was a term for an entrance they would have in city walls. Cities were all walled. They have the big entrance in the middle. The big gate. They also have smaller gates to go in and out of. And the eye of the needle was a very small gate that was hard. It'd be hard to get a camel through, and it would be possible to camel through laden with goods, all sorts of packages on it and stuff like that. So it wasn't quite the actual eye of a needle in the sense of a little needle here. But it was intended as a challenge, and the Gospels are pervaded by the dangers of wealth, of them actually being sort of bad for you, creating spiritual dangers. Gospels focus right on, the Gospels direct your focus to God. Right, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul. This is the first and greatest commandment. Nothing in there about making money. It prioritizes other things. It ignores the fact of, trying to find a passage here. It ignores the emphasis on over in 205 on the importance of Christianity, the centrality of Christianity of suffering and self-denial. Okay? Osteen's message, go for it, make your dreams happen, God will bless your dreams, you can lead your best life. Hate that phrase, your best life, but really hate it, but nonetheless, that's what they say today, at least according to my children. The gospel is full of talk about suffering as a part of life. It may be an unfortunate part of life, but it's there. What does pick up your cross and follow me mean? It means you're going to suffer. Accept your suffering as I have accepted mine. And that in some mysterious way, your suffering leads to redemption. Okay? This ethos, Osteen is something that's just completely contrary to the gospel. And again, just on that vein, and what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, command remains. Sell everything that you have, give your money to the poor, follow me. Maybe that's not Christian vision, has always said that, not meant for everyone, but some people are called to that. Man, that's an important part. So anyway, he says, what Osteen and company do is they reduce, I'm on page 205, the middle paragraph is just a short quote. Because people like Osteen, Christianity risks becoming an appendage to Americanism, a useful metaphysical thread for capitalist society's social fabric, but a faith that's bound, perhaps fatally, to the rise and fall of the gross domestic product. Fair enough? We all good? I see people still flipping pages, so I'm stopping here. Let them find the right spot they were looking for. I already can't help you there, Kenny, because I already flipped pages. I don't remember which page it was. It was 205. I don't remember the paragraph. It was on 205. Then we move to a theme that's been percolating throughout the book, if you read carefully, but then becomes a central theme here. The God within. And this takes us to a topic we have already talked about. And if you read the chapter, see, hey, we talked about that stuff. It brings us, remember we talked about individualistic religion. Make your own religion. Okay? You don't pick between these different accounts that all say we're true. Figure out which one really is true in your judgment. You don't have to make that choice. You simply mix and match. Take what you want out of each. So take this practice from Catholicism, this from Judaism, mix in a little bit of Buddhism, perhaps a little Hindu ritual, and make your own religion. This individualistic, do-it-yourself, make-up-yourself religion is connected with what we call therapeutic religion, right? And that is a view that religion is not really about getting you right with God. Religion is not about bringing you in contact with the ultimate meaning of human existence. Religion is not about knowing the truth of where we came from and where we're going, an answer to the mystery of human life. Religion is about comfort, peace of mind. And that's a very unique approach to religion. No, let me just pause here to make a comment to try and maybe focus this a little bit. Let's just focus on Christianity for a moment. We could do Islam, we could do Judaism. It's not necessarily all that comforting. Maybe in kind of the ultimate message, God loves you, He wants what's good, He wants to save you. But it is full of threats that you might not be saved, you might end up in another very bad place, generally referred to as hell. And one of the central messages is, yes, it gives a lot of comfort, but also judgment. You will be judged. You will be held accountable. Everything you've ever done, everything you've ever thought, will be part of that judgment. So there's a lot of scary stuff in there. Well, at least if you're me and constantly not sure of how well I'm doing. There's an old thing in Christian theology, the 4 last things: death, judgment, heaven, hell. Those are 4 final things. You die, you're judged. And then you're giving a ticket to one place or to the other. Therapeutic religion doesn't have that hard head. Therapeutic religion, everything's going to be fine. There's nothing for you to worry about. It's kind of an easy-going, it's designed to give peace of mind, enable you to relax and get rid of that anxiety. Waking up in the middle of the night and said, am I really following God? What will happen when I face Him? So that's what it is, and this is perhaps of all these friends, maybe the most pervasive, as he is going to tell you. It comes in different varieties, but kind of this individualistic, therapeutic religion. I want to read you some passages, and these are some of them are pretty lengthy here to kind of set the stage. He tells the story of Elizabeth Gilbert. Elizabeth Gilbert was a writer. Elizabeth Gilbert's about in the story that becomes very famous and writes stuff about her life and about her religious quest. In 2001, at age 32, Gilbert was a professional success story with a seemingly enviable private life. She had 3 books and National Book Award nomination under her belt, a rewarding job as a travel writer, an apartment in Manhattan, and a big house in Hudson Valley, as well as a devoted husband with whom she intended to start a family and soon. But just 5 years later, she was something else entirely, having traded the marriage and the houses for a globe-trotting spiritual quest. The quest led to a publishing phenomenon known as Eat, Pray, Love, one woman's search for everything across Italy, India, and Indonesia. And it becomes a movie. I'm on 211. First paragraph of 211. Now we're moving into the second. And then it goes on to tell the background, what causes her to do this. At 3 a.m. one night, Gilbert found herself locked in the bathroom of her Hudson Valley home, weeping furiously over the life she thought she wanted but didn't want anymore, and then falling on her knees in prayer. This was a first for me, she informs the reader. Culturally, she was some sort of Christian, born a Protestant of the white Anglo-Saxon persuasion, but theologically, she had always been unable to swallow that one fixed rule of Christianity system, that Christ is the only path to God. She has an open-ended attitude. She talks to the universe, the void, the force, the supreme self, the whole, the creator, the light, the higher power. She concludes, I don't want to be married anymore. I don't want to live in this house. I don't want to have children. At long last, someone spoke back. It was not an Old Testament Hollywood Charlton Heston voice, Gilbert writes. Nor was it a voice telling me I must build a baseball field in my backyard. Do you get that reference? Field of Dreams. It's a movie where a guy hears a voice to build a baseball field, and then that sets off a series of them. That would be useful, building a like baseball fields. They're one of the places where I'm happiest. And it was merely my own voice speaking from within my own self. And yet, this was my voice as I'd never heard it before. It was my voice perfectly wise, calm, and compassionate. This was what my voice would sound like if I'd only ever experienced love and certainty. Then the voice says, go back to bed. Okay? So she goes back to bed, and then she leaves the husband in the house, and the family's just planning on having to begin a search. Travels around the world, going to all sorts of places. Finds a cool new boyfriend. Over on 213, there was a second miracle in the form of a publisher's advice that she'd go to Italy, India, and Indonesia and write a travel book. And you go through the travel book and stuff. And the part that interested us is, very bottom of page 213. Gilbert fulfills the promise of that first late night encounter with a frank, earthy, and entirely unembarrassed account of what it feels like for a late modern, post-feminist, or bourgeois American to search relentlessly for the direct, unmediated, overwhelming experience of God. It goes through all her spiritual exertions and stuff. She studies Hinduism, trains in Hindu religious discipline, doesn't become a Hindu. But neither does she become Christian. All religious traditions, she concludes, are equally valid paths to the divine. All religious teachings are just transporting metaphors designed to bridge the gulf between the finite and the infinite. Most religious institutions claim a monopoly on divinity that they don't really enjoy. Skipping down a bit, you have every right to cherry pick when it comes to moving your spirit and finding peace in God. You take whatever works from wherever you can find it. Her final theological epiphany is the same as the first one, a journey that began with God speaking to her in my own voice from within my own self, albeit as I never heard it before, ends with the realization that the Elizabeth Gilbertness of that voice is the key to understanding the nature of divinity. The highest spiritual wisdom, she writes, the highest spiritual wisdom, she writes, isn't just that God waits for us inside in our own hearts and minds and souls. It's that God dwells within you as you yourself, exactly the way you are. Skipping on the next page, somewhere within us all there does exist a supreme self who is eternally at peace. That supreme self is our true identity. So again, on 216, he gives his quick summary of her conclusions, if you will, her creed. First, all organized religions offer only a partial glimpse of God. And we must seek God through feeling rather than reason, and experience rather than dogma. Listen to your feelings. Second, moving to the next paragraph, God is everywhere within everything, but at the same time, the best way to encounter the divine is within the divinity that resides inside yourself. Third, that God's all-encompassing nature means sin, death, and evil will ultimately be reconciled rather than defeated. And finally, that beatitude is constantly available here on earth.
So I guess I'm going to improvise as I go here. Couple comments on this.
Note, to begin with,
The pantheism
God is everywhere. God is in everything. And we met pantheism in our friend Alexis, right? Alexis de Tocqueville. So there's that. Then there is the notion that I myself am divine. I am God. The identity of God in man, one might say. And what does this God tell us? Happiness is to be found in this world. Lead your best life. We slide back towards our friend Joel Osteen. Remember Tocqueville talking about how human beings, if I'm going too fast, slow me down, how human beings have a drive for the infinite, a yearning for the immortal, how happiness is cannot be found in the world of space and time. She does not agree. You have here the emergence of a new religion here. Highly individualized, cherry pick and choose whatever you like. And the criteria picking isn't because it's true, necessarily. It's because it's comfortable. It gives you peace. It helps you accept yourself. So there you have it. It goes on. Talks about this as a consumerist religion, ultimately taking us back that way. And then you read several pages developing this. He quotes at one point Ralph Waldo Emerson, arguing this goes back to Emerson, who again kind of vaguely had a pantheism combined with the notion of the divinity of the individual. Again, takes a series of authors and stuff, both contemporary and historic, wrestling with this, quotes Tocqueville several times. And, so that is what you have here. And he said, he says, obviously this isn't Christianity, although it has Christian forms, or, she sort of slipped the out of the world of Christianity with their Christian versions of this. These ideas are pervasive in the culture. Slides into a discussion, I'm trying to find that here. Philip Rieff, my boy. In a famous book, The Triumph of the Therapeutic. Excuse me, I'm hiccuping. I'm on first paragraph on the page. Religious man, Rieff argues, was giving way to psychological man. In place of a secularized Christianity building the kingdom of God on earth, Rieff foresaw an age of therapy in which the pursuit of well-being replaces the quest for either salvation or judgment. Religious man was born to be saved, he wrote, but psychological man is born to be pleased. The new man would be interested neither in political utopianisms nor moral idealisms. All existing orders would be equally acceptable to him, so long as the powers that be preserve order and manage an economy of abundance. So would all ethical systems. If immoral materials rejected under earlier cultural criteria are therapeutically effective, enhancing one's sense of well-being, then they are useful.
What page is this?
231. It does not aim, like its predecessors, for victory for some rival commitment, but rather as a way of using all commitments which amounts to loyalty to none. I believe the cry of the ascetic would lose precedence to one feels. the caveat of the therapeutic. But he predicted with uncanny accuracy the way therapeutic mentality would dress itself in the garments of the religious traditions it had displaced. Psychological man and his independence from all gods can feel free to use all God terms. I imagine he will be a hedger against his own bets, a user of any faith that lends itself to a therapeutic use. Fair enough? Again, this individualized therapeutic religion. But we're not done with the chapter quite yet. Wish we spent more time in the chapter. I could spend a couple days on it. But he now discusses what he sees as kind of a Christian version of this therapeutic religion. But it's not a religion of a particular church. It's something that he argues now is pervasive in all churches. And he relies on the writings of a sociologist here named Christian Smith. He just published a book last year, 2025. One of the 20 books of 2025 I need to read and have it. Too many books, too little time. So, Smith is a sociologist. He's not kind of a theologian or philosopher or something. He's not even doing the kind of stuff, Reef is. He's talking to people. He has a research team. He's written many, many books. And he goes around and talks to people about religion. So he might do a book on the religion of children and talk to 200 children across the country. Interview them, distill, look for commonalities, look for conclusions. He's written on the spiritual life of teenagers, the spiritual life of young adults, including college students. You'd be in the young adult category, and all his books are very worth reading. Little plug there. In the reading section on the campus site, I had a couple of articles or book excerpts from him, but we're so far behind you, I didn't do them. But there's no reason you can't print them out and read them on your own, and I'm sure most of you will, right? Because you want the most possible for your money. See, I work in the field where the customer prefers less for their money. It's a very odd situation. I'm like a guy selling cars, and they say, okay, I'll pay the sticker price, but I want you to take the fancy tires off and rip out the stereo system. A very odd mentality. But anyway, Smith's conclusion, pull this together. Smith's thinking converges on this idea of moralistic therapeutic deism. That, by the way, is a terrible name for it. I don't know how he came up with such a lousy name for what he's describing, but he did. Moralistic therapeutic deism. I'm on page 233, where there's a long discussion of this. And this isn't something separate. It's not like, okay, you have the Presbyterians, the Episcopalians, and the moralistic therapeutic deism. This is a pattern of what that infiltrates and colonizes existing churches in America. It says that toward the bottom of page 232. So there, you pick a religious tradition present in America, there is a moralistic therapeutic version of it. So what is moralistic therapeutic deism, you ask? Just the question I was going to raise, coincidentally. Okay, over, and he begins his discussion, but if you look at the second paragraph on 233, Smith, our friend, do that said, it's a resonant term, but not an entirely accurate one. So he doesn't like this term. Doesn't accurately describe it. But if you go back right the paragraph above that, you can get the de facto creed of moralistic therapeutic deism. Literally a numbered list. I like that approach, always numbered lists. One, a God who created and ordered the world and watches over human life on earth. So there's a God who made and ordered the world and watches over human life. What does this God want, you ask? Number 2, God wants people to be good, nice, and fair to each other, as is taught in all the world's religions. So no matter your religion, it's about niceness. You want to be a nice person. Incidentally, I'm trying to resist the temptation, but I am weak. We try to take nice as a principal virtue. We want everyone to be nice. If you think about a lot of the great spiritual figures, they're not really nice people. In the sense you and I mean nice, pleasant, never render anyone upset, very agreeable and stuff, lots of small talk. Moses commanding the Pharaoh, give me what I want or your children die. That doesn't strike me as very nice. Jesus, throughout his ministry, challenging people, telling them you're on the road to hell, condemning them. Whited sepulchres, one of my favorite New Testament phrases. Sepulchre is like a grave site. It means what you are, you're dead, but it's covered over with a veneer of white paint so people don't see your rotting soul. So, 3, the central goal of life is to be happy and to feel good about oneself. Not quite pick up your cross and follow me. 4, God does not need to be particularly involved in one's life except when God is needed to resolve a problem. So you don't need to worry about God. Think about God until you get a problem. Then you say, God, please solve it. God's kind of your, how can I put this? Your cosmic assistant. When you need that extra help, he will be there for you. And 5, good people, which is pretty much anyone who is, what? What's the word? Nice, right. Go to heaven when they die. So he talks about the moralism. Among the things he says on this page, I'm just grabbing them sort of in random. This God is not demanding. Think what he asks of you. Be nice, smile, have a happy day. Leave generous tips. Don't yell at people. Don't give the finger to the guy who cuts you off. Okay? It's not, it's something, it's not nothing. But that isn't really very demanding. As contrasted with, be holy as your Father in heaven is holy. Or with, again, get your belongings, sell everything you own, give the money to the poor, follow me.
Could you say nice? It's just kind of like a watered down version of just do unto others.
Yeah, very watered down version, because do unto others can imply serious responsibility and obligations to them that could endanger you and endanger your life. This is just like, don't be mean. So it's fine. I'm fine with calling it a watered down version of that. I think that's accurate. But you have to understand how watered down it is. Not being mean is very different from making really big sacrifices to help another person. It's have a nice day. Again, the Good Samaritan parable that presumably we all know. Right, the guy's mugged, he's laying inside of a road bleeding, everyone walks by until you finally get a guy who steps up and helps. And the point is, the picture of the guys walking by and saying, have a nice day, hope you're feeling better. That's sort of being nice. What the guy does is something that, of course, He takes the guy, who by the way is part of a different tribe that hates his tribe and he hates them, throws him on his own donkey. So now he's walking, transports this guy to an inn, pays for medical care, pays for food and whatnot for the guy, for him to be taken care of, and then comes back later at the end of his business to make sure the guy's okay and see if he has to give more money to cover what's being done. That's a sacrifice. Being nice is not a sacrifice. It's a pretty minimal. He says over on the bottom of that page again. MTD, as he's now calling it, moralistic therapeutic deism, essentially about feeling good, happy, secure, at peace. Sound familiar? Therapeutic. It's about attaining subjective well-being, being able to resolve problems and getting along amiably with another people. If there's an essential aspect of living a moral life in therapeutic faith, it's the obligation to always persist in feeling good about oneself. Several teenagers summed it up this way: just don't be an asshole. It's kind of a good, powerful summary. I kind of like that. And that's vague, by the way. Luke. Theologically speaking, he quotes another author, this watered-down, anemic, and insipid form of Judeo-Christianity is pretty repulsive. So he sees that. Goes on to point out, it has benefits. Certainly, that the whole story. The good side is if you're being nice, that precludes certain kinds of behavior. Right? You can't walk up and slit your throat. That would not qualify as being nice. That would not qualify being nice. But he goes on to say, this is the last full paragraph on that page. But, a nice society is not necessarily a just one. Men may smile at their neighbors about loving them and decline to judge their fellow citizens' belief out of a broader indifference to their fate. An ego that's never wounded, never trammeled or traduced, and that's taught to regard its deepest impulses as the promptings of the divine spirit, can easily turn out to be an ego that never learns sympathy, compassion, or real wisdom. When contentment becomes an end unto itself, the way that human content expresses itself could look an awful lot like vanity and decadence. The growing vanity may even be quantifiable. Between 1982 and 2006, they had college students fill out the narcissistic personality inventory. It asked responses to things like, if I ruled the world, it would be a better place. I think I'm a special person. I can live my life any way I want. The trend was consistent. The average student in 2006 had a higher narcissism score than 65% of college students a generation earlier. The millennials were more likely to agree with statements like, I find it easy to manipulate people, I insist on getting the respect that is due me. In the 1950s, a poll suggests 12% of teenagers agreed with the statement, I'm an important person. This is the top of 235. Now it's 80%. As narcissism has waxed, empathy has waned. In 2010, research at the University of Michigan reported that contemporary college students scored about 40% lower than their predecessors in the 1970s on tests assessing their ability to put themselves in other shoes. They were more likely than their parents' generation to agree with statements like, Other people's misfortunes do not usually disturb me, and less likely to agree with prompts like I sometimes try to understand my friends better by imagining how things look from their perspective. And then the block quote below, and then I will call it a day. The majority of the interviews stated that nobody has a natural and general responsibility or obligation to help people. Most of those interviewed said that it's nice if people help others, but nobody really has to. Take care of other people in need is an individual's choice. If you want to do it, good. If not, it's up to you. Even when pressed, what about victims of natural disasters or political oppression? What about helpless people who are not responsible for their poverty or disabilities? What about famines and floods and tsunamis? No, they replied, if someone wants to help them, good for that person, but nobody has to. And in the final paragraph, he talks about Americans are more and more unable to master our impulses and desires. A nation of narcissists turns out to be a nation of gamblers and speculators, gluttons and gym obsessives, pornographers and Ponzi schemers, in which household debt rises alongside public debt, and bankers and pensioners and automakers and union all compete to empty the public trough. Okay? And one final sentence. I keep saying we're done, but I love this so much, this chapter. 236, it is the second full paragraph. What the cult of the God within has done is to make American religion an enabler of this success rather than a potential curb against it. Do you know what I'm saying? There's nothing remotely countercultural about it. Fair enough? Well, I didn't quite finish the book. We got one chapter left. We'll do that next time, and we'll do the Bullivant book quickly and try to tie some things together. Are we good? We have papers if you need assistance in any way. Give me a yell.